a teacher of history, from Gaza High School. I know most of you couldn't be knowing me, but I'm going to be sharing with you history of O-level. We shall be sharing a few things here and there. And now that you have seen me, I can now take off my face, my ugly face, of course. Yeah. Okay. Today, I don't know where members are coming from, but we are here. We are going to look at the basics of history of O-level, the basics, the things, and I'm going to be using some few scenarios here, which of course I may not be. You'll just be listening to them when I'm through. Just be listening. The coordinator could be allowing people either to respond, or I can talk, and maybe the other day you can have responses. History of O-level. I believe that at this point, most of you must have covered all that you need to cover in the syllabus. Two, I believe that most of you could have been guided. You could have undergone some guidances, either by your teachers or by external persons. Well, you could have been guided. So I'm not here that I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm going to give you miraculous things that you haven't had before. No. What I'm going to do is tell you things which probably you could have had before, or which probably could be adding something on what you already have. Or three, which could be emphasizing what you've been told, such that you understand that your teacher or your teachers are not different. They are saying things which are actually being said elsewhere. Or even then, I could be saying things exactly that your teachers have been saying. Why? Because even religiously, we believe that there is no prophet that was believed in their motherland. That is, sometimes learners, when their teachers are teaching them, they may feel, oh, but it's not, maybe it's not, maybe it's not. But when a prophet comes from outside, they believe them so much. So straight away, I want us to have one scenario here. Just listen, listen to the scenario, then I'll guide accordingly. To that scenario.
Teacher Zilaba? Teacher Zilaba? You can unmute.
You had muted me and everywhere.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, once again, good afternoon. Once again, those who are just coming in, I'm teacher. Those who are just coming in, I'm teacher Ziraba, teacher of history, and currently I'm teaching at Gaza High School. I'm here with you to look at how history of O level, basically senior 4, is being handled. So before we had that small disturbance, I was telling you that we are going to look at some scenarios which will be guiding us on how history is assessed and actually basically these basics. And I was saying that I'm not coming here as the alpha and the omega, as someone who is going to bring things that you have never heard about, or as someone who is saying things that are so unique. No, but I'm bringing things which have either been said by your teachers and will be said by other people still after me, and or just emphasizing or just adding a few spices here and there to make history quite lively and lovely. Well, I was requested by my contact person, Mr. Kaziba, that I come here and we share some scenarios and then a guide. So I'm using a guide for some mock paper, which I want to share with you. But before we go there, what do we need to know about history of the O-level curriculum? History, as of today, we have to look at the setting, the approach, the scoring, and finally the grading. We must look at all those things. Though we may not have time to look at everything, but let us look at a few things here and there. And then I must also tell you that after my lesson, you'll be free to try out some of the things that we would have discussed. You try them out, you send on my number, which I could give later, and I could be marking yours, but in my free time, you can write some small essay, you scan it, you send it. I could be marking you, and I guide you on where you have gone wrong. Okay, now straight to the point. History, of course, has 4 questions, which are set from the three elements of construct, or the 3 areas. We may not go much into details. Your teachers have handled that, but you know that question 1 comes from basically senior 1 work. Then question 2 comes from basically senior 2 work and some topics of senior 4. Question 3 comes from senior 3 book, which is political education basically. And question 4 comes from senior 4 work and some concepts of senior 2. Question 4 comes from senior 4 book and some concepts of senior 2. Okay, that's gone. Now, how are they set? We set scenarios which are quite simpler for learners to understand, which are supposed to be easy to analyze and internalize, and 3 scenarios which got. So these scenarios, when they are set, we shall be having basically 2 tasks, A and B. And these tasks are supposed to be addressed and handled in the same way. Just first look at the scenario. Listen carefully, this scenario, then we can see how to handle that scenario. Listen to the scenario. Here it comes. It says, senior 3 students from Wokedi Secondary School visited a museum in Tororo where they saw such items as cowrie shells, beads, and copper wire. The guide at the museum explained that these goods came through long-distance trade using caravans, middlemen, and trade routes. He also encouraged students to compare this trade route, this trade with modern trade. Now, tasks. Task A. Describe how the trade in the scenario was organized. And task B says, compare the above trade with modern trade of East Africa. So, how do we go about such a scenario? Now, one, we must understand that the first statement that you put on paper is a statement identifying the problem in the scenario. And that is, for this case, the learner should identify the point. Say the problem in the scenario is understanding the organization of long distance trade. Because in this case, I'm not giving you a chance because you are muted, but the first thing would be identifying the problem in the scenario. And in this case, we would have said, the problem in the scenario, of course, the identification of the problem can differ. It can be, someone can say, the problem in the scenario is knowing the participation of people of East Africa in long distance trade. Someone may say, the problem in the scenario is the organization of long distance trade. So it will depend, but so as long as it is within line, within what we want as a problem, that is the first statement we put on paper. Then secondly, we say the learner should define or introduce what is in the scenario. And in this case, it is long distance trade. So the learner should endeavor to define long distance trade and tell us what it was, how it happened, what was involved there in the introduction. Now, how do we score? Here we say that a learner identifying the problem and introducing both things score 1 mark. Score 1 mark. Actually, first write for me these 5 letters, but write them horizontal, write them vertically. I mean, as you are from top to the bottom. Write these 5 letters. Write I, write K, write T, A, and C. IKTAC, as in the acronym IKTAC. 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 Now, let me first explain that abbreviation and acronym. Let me first explain it. The I in that abbreviation means identification and introduction. That's the I. Identification and introduction. It means identification and introduction. 2, the K means knowledge or historical knowledge. Historical knowledge or just knowledge. The T means historical thinking. Of course, I'm not speaking new things. Historical thinking. The A means application. Historical application. Historical application. And the C means the conclusion. Means the conclusion. Those are the elements that are based on to assess score a candidate. Those 5. The identification of the problem and the introduction, the knowledge, the thinking, the application, and the conclusion. Now, before I look at this question this task before I look at the question in the task I've given you, let me first look at a different one. Supposing you are given one task. Supposing you are given one task only, and was saying maybe describe how the trade in question was organized. So 1, you would identify the problem. 2, you would introduce the problem, and both of them would give you a score of 1. Score of 1. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now we go to the body. Here we say that any learner, if the question is single side, there is no part B. Here you can say that any learner who gives us 8 or 9 or 10 plus responses, well explained and well applied, that learner will get the maximum score of 3, because usually 3 is the maximum. Shall say, but of course when you're in our schools, teachers can set their own standards of scores. A teacher can say, for us, we are marking this number out of 8, or out of 10, or out of 5. But let us use 5 as a standard. You can say, any learner who gives 8 plus, or 9 plus, or 10 plus, depending on demand of the setter, the item setter. You can say, if a learner gives, let's say, 8 plus responses, that's 8, 9, 10, and the learner has given a point, the learner has explained it, the learner has applied it. If there are 8 in that category, this learner can readily score the maximum score of 3. Then you can say, however, the learner gives us 4 to 7 responses, well explained, well applied, the learner will get a score of 2. Then we say, however, if the learner gives us 1 to 3, whether explained or not explained, whether applied or not applied, the learner will get a score of 1. Meaning, therefore, on the body, on the content, leave out the introduction, on the body, the maximum you can get there will be a 3. But you can even get a 2, or a 1, or 0, maybe if you didn't write anything. So at that point, if you are getting from maximum, you have the 1 point from top there, 1 introduction and the identification. You have the 3 for the body, and then the conclusion. Once a learner gives a conclusion, which is logical, sensible, logical, meaningful, mature, that learner will equally get a mark for the conclusion. So that is it. Now, how do we score the body? When you give your points, the teacher will expect your point to bear 3 ticks for it to score the maximum. So that's how it will be done. After marking, the teacher will write those 5 letters as I gave them to you, the IKTAC, and then we'll say, I will put a dash, meaning I, the learner, identified and introduced. Therefore, there is a score of 1. But if you just simply introduce, they may deny you a mark. When you didn't identify the problem, they may deny you a mark. I repeat, when you simply introduce without identification of the problem, they can deny you a mark. But be wiser. Identify the problem and then introduce it. So the teacher will say, the learner identified and also introduced, therefore has a score of 1. Then you will say, K, the knowledge. How many points did the learner give? How many points? The K's. The K means historical knowledge, or point given, points given. The point is given in a sentence format. For example, if you are looking at a migration, for example, and say, people migrate from Uganda to other countries in search for greener pastures in form of jobs. That is a sentence format. People migrate from Uganda to other countries because of bandwagon or seeing other people migrating. That's a sentence. People migrate from other countries to the other countries because of political instability. That's the sentence statement. However, when you simply say love for adventure, civil wars, or political instability, or blah, 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 that is not given as a point given or knowledge. The K or the knowledge is a statement given in a sentence format as a point identification or point statement. So I will ask myself, how many points did Lana give? I mean the K's, which are well explained and well articulated. I'll simply say the learner gave 8 and above. I'll write 8 plus, meaning the learner with the points giving, the learner was accurate, gave 8 points and above. Then I'll come to the T, the thinking. The thinking is the explanation. I'll ask myself, how many points did the learner explain? If I'm only giving them, how many points did the learner explain? Then I'll say, also the learner explained 8 and above, 8 plus. I'll write 8 plus. Then I'll ask myself, how many points did the learner apply? Maybe you applied 8 plus or you less. If you applied 8 plus, I'll say the learner also applied 8 plus. Now I'll put a bracket and say, with the learner gave 8, explained 8, and applied 8. So in total, the learner qualifies for the 3. However, if you gave 8 plus points, but when it came to explanation, you explained like 6 or 5, and when it came to application, you applied like maybe 4 or 5. Of course, I will say learner gave 8 points, but explained 6 and applied 5. Therefore, that learner can't get the maximum of 3. The learner will get 2. Or accordingly. Or the learner could have given 8 points, explained 8, and applied none. You can't even get 2. You could get 1 because the application is very important. And because you didn't give application, even if you gave 8 points, explained the 8, but applied nothing, you'll definitely get a 1. Then I come down like that. I say, this other learner gave 6 points, maybe explained all of them, applied all of them, therefore gets a 2. Or learner gave 6, explained 4, applied the 1 or 2, they also gets a 2. Like that. So in other words, the point is we need to give the points, we need to explain them, we need to apply them. Then finally, I'll come to a point and say, how about conclusion? So the learner did not conclude, therefore misses the other mark at the bottom. But if the learner concluded and the conclusion is quite logical, there is some sense in just saying, in conclusion, the trade was organized as above. No, be some quite logical. The conclusion, the trade in the scenario was organized based on caravans, based on middlemen, based on routes, like the central route, the southern route, northern route, as discussed above. That one can be quite logical, and you can say, yes, conclusion is quite logical, and has been given, and therefore the learner qualifies to get a 1. So that is if the question is for only one part. That's how we can handle it. I would wish if you had allowed people to write some questions, maybe it would be also nice, because I would need to have responses. So I wish you could allow them to be writing, not of course mute them, but writing, they can write, and I can be responding to what they have written as we go along. Okay. Now, if the question is of 2 parts, A and B, how is it addressed? Of course, we shall follow the same criteria, but with some changes. 1, the question has parts A and B. We shall insist on the same criteria, but of course, the scoring will change a little. Someone may say, because it has A and B, we can mark out of 8 or even out of 10, depending on what the examiners have agreed. But for this case, let us mark out of 8. How? we shall say, we shall have the I, the K, the T, and the, I, the K, the T, the A, the C. But this time it will differ a little. Let me explain. The question with part A and B. On part A, we only expect you want to identify the problem and define what has been given in the scenario. And you get your own mark like you got the other time. Then you go to the body, and give us the points, just as I've been explaining. But this time, we can lower the threshold and say, if you give us 6 plus points, were explained, were applied, you can get maximum of 3. But if you give us like 3 to 5, you can get 2. If you give us 1 and 2, you can get 1. So we lower the threshold a little. We don't conclude part A. I repeat, we identify, we introduce, but we don't conclude part A. We don't conclude part A. We just leave it hanging. Finish the points and leave it hanging and start part B. Let me repeat the third time. If the question has 2 parts, introduce part, identify the problem, and introduce the problem for part A, and then give us the points. We shall award you for introduction and identification. We shall award you for the points, but don't conclude. When you're going for part B, write part B and straight go to the points that has been asked. You can simply say, maybe the following is a comparison, or the following are this, whatever you have been asked. Don't introduce part B. Don't conclude part A. Don't introduce part B. And when the teacher is writing his scores for part A, you write the following. You write I, identification of the problem and the introduction. K, number of points given. T, number of points explained. A, number of points applied. Only he will not write the C conclusion, he will not write there for part A. Then for part B, the teacher will write K, there will be no I this time. Simply write K, number of points given, T, explained, A, applied, and C, the conclusion will be on part B. So, for you to give us the points, as you have talked about it earlier, if you have qualified for the 3, you'll get the 3, or the 2, or the 1. Then we shall expect you to have a conclusion, which is quite logical. And once you give it, it will be marked. So meaning, the question that has 2 parts, A and B, we introduce and identify the problem on part A, and only give the points. On part B, we don't introduce. We simply go to what has been asked, and we conclude. Meaning, therefore, that there is only 1 introduction and 1 conclusion. Listen carefully. On a question that has 2 parts, there is only 1 introduction and only 1 conclusion. There is no introduction for part B. There is no conclusion for part A. So it is only 1 introduction and 1 conclusion. Period. And you go. Okay? Hopefully I'm understood. Younger boy. Hello. So, you understand? Now, that is what I've been, that's what it is. Now, come to the points. How do we give our points? How do we explain them? And how do you apply them? How do you know that my essay is having all the 3 components? Because I've said your essay should have the statement of the point, the introduction, and basically the application. Sorry, I've said the point should be there, given, explained, and applied. So how do you apply, or how do you know that your question or your work is having all the three? The simple logic is make sure that every point that you give should have three full stops. That will help you to understand things. Every point that you give should have three full stops. And once you realize that you are having less than three full stops, just know you are not yet giving what is required. That will just help you. Three full stops. For every point that you give, you make sure there are three full stops. Okay. Let us give the example. Let me use the example of the scenario I gave you. And you're looking at the task is saying, describe how the trade in the scenario was organized. Now, we start and say, the trade in the scenario was organized by following specific trade routes. That's the point. The trade in the scenario was organized following specific trade routes. That's the point. And we put a full stop there. And the teacher will be obliged and required to put a tick there. And that tick will indicate that the child has a K already. You continue and say, long distance trade followed specific trade routes linking the paths from the interior to the coast. This included the central trade route, the southern trade route, and northern trade route. So, oh, wonderful. You have explained and even given some examples. You put another tick there for the explanation. This is now the T, the historical thinking. But that is not enough. Then apply. How do we apply? You can say, these routes allowed the movement of goods like copper wire and beads, as seen in the museum, to move from the interior to reach the coast. Oh, okay. The routes were the routes were helping the movement of goods from the interior to the coast. Okay, that one is the application. Okay, that one will be the application. So that will be the third statement, and therefore the third full stop. So the moment you realize that in your presentation, you have less than three full stops, that means your work is not having the three components. The first full stop comes after you identifying the point. The second full stop comes after you explaining the point. And third full stop comes after you applying the point. Let me give you another example. Okay. Cool. Another example. The trade in the scenario involved the use of caravans by the traders in its organization. That's the point given. Say, hey, okay, full stop. And teacher will place a tick there and then explain and say, traders moved in large groups known as caravans from the interior to the coast and the vice versa. Say, oh, okay, these are the caravans, large groups. Okay, they put another tick, will come there, and it will be implying historical thinking. Then apply. And say, these caravans were important as they provided security to the traders. They provide security to the traders, especially from dangerous animals and the like. Say, okay, that's wonderful. So they went into caravans because they were afraid of dangerous animals. When they were in groups, okay, that's nice. Meaning that will be the third statement. So in brief, I'm trying to tell you that when you're writing a paragraph of history, whether the question has part A and B or has one part, the paragraph that you give must be having three full stops. That's the simplest word I can use. must be having 3 full stops. The first full stop comes after you giving the point. The second full stop comes after you explaining the point. And the third full stop comes after you applying the point. When you apply, you put a full stop there, and we shall say the learner is good. The learner is good. Okay. I can give also another example. I'm trying to show how we should write our essays with a point, explanation, and application. Okay, another one you can say the trade also involved the use of middlemen in its organization. Wonderful. So, okay, that's nice. The trade involved the use of middlemen in the organization. So, okay, that's nice. Then explain what the middlemen. These were people who would help to link the interior communities with the coastal people or the traders. Say, okay. So these are the middlemen, those who would help to link the coastal people and those in the interior. Okay. Another tick will come there because you have explained to us who the middlemen were. Yeah. But still apply. What did the intervention or their involvement mean? Continue and say. This helped distant groups of people to participate in trade without traveling far away. Understand? This helped distant groups of people to participate in trade without traveling for longer distances because there were people who were getting the commodities from the interior, moving with them up to some distance for the other group coming from the coast to meet them along the way. So you can say that that one was also, that's the application. So the application is that part that gives us the implication of what you are explaining. When you say they use the middlemen, well and good, middlemen they were used, is fine. What were middlemen? You explain. Middlemen were people who were linking the coast to the interior by transporting the goods. Okay. So what does that mean? And now that's the application part. Then you tell us that these people's involvement helped the people from longer distances to trade without moving for longer distances, as the goods were picked from the interior and brought along the middle part of the route for the others to come and pick them from there. And this therefore helped the trade to flourish peacefully. That's wonderful. Can say, oh, that's nice. I don't know if my stuff is being got very well or it is sinking. But of course, being that some of you are hearing me for the first time, I may not be in a position to give everything, but hopefully you'll understand a few things, which in our next meeting, if it happens to be there anyway, you'll be in a position, or you can even, as I said earlier, you can be writing some essays, not even an essay, a point or an introduction. Because by the way, let me tell you, history is passed by practice. History is like mathematics. You can't pass history unless you are good at practicing. So you can practice how to write introductions. You can practice how to write points, which are well given, explained, and applied. You can practice how to write conclusions and be sending. When you send, I can be marking them and guiding you here and there in my free time when I happen to get some free time. Of course, I may not respond to you immediately, but I can respond to you whenever I have time. So as I'm about to conclude, I'll give my number there for people who are willing to practice, to do the practice. Let me give you one more point about the organization of this trade. Can say that the trade in its organization used the barter system as a mode of exchange. It's a wonderful. Put a tick there because you have told us that the trade used the barter system of exchange as our barter system of trade as a means of exchange. That's good. The point has been given, but still you need to explain what you mean by barter system of exchange. You go ahead and tell us that. The trade was mainly done through exchanging goods for goods, which was known as barter trade. Oh, so exchanging goods for goods, is that what you mean by barter? Okay, we put another tick there, and we say the learner has explained, or the learner is thinking. The learner is thinking, but that is not enough still. So you have to even add this. You can even add some examples and say, for example, bids were exchanged for ivory or gold or food. Say, hey, that's just an example. Then apply. This system worked because the currency was not widely used in the interior, and this facilitated the trade. So, because of this barter trade, it was working since there was no currency in the interior. Okay, that's nice. You understand? That is basically that's how we can go about this. Alternatively, for purposes of helping as a coding this program, I will give you this document which I'm using. I will give you, I have my marking guide here. I'll give you this document. Those who want it, you go through and be practicing how best you can write those good essays. Because my document here has a sample introduction, has a sample conclusion, and this is a full document. So, of course, because you have limited time, I may not be in a position to give you everything as you need it. But what I can help you about is for those who want, as you send me a message, I send you the document. You go through somehow, somewhere, you'll grasp a few things. Because in my document, I was explicitly giving the points. I give a point, I explain it, and I apply it, or even give examples. So you can use it to write some good essays and send them out for marking or to anybody for helping. That is, I can promise that one when I'm about to wind up with the essay. So that is basically the first part that I want. So part B of this question, of this scenario, was saying to compare the above trade with the modern trade in East Africa. In other words, we're asking you, or learners, to compare the long distance trade with the trade of today. How are they similar? How are they different? But of course, when it comes to comparison, you have to tell us, first of all, similarities and differences. So, you would compare and say, one, for example, the mode of transport in the two trades differs. You explain. In the long distance trade, they are using human porterage or potters and even some animals like donkeys. But in modern trade, they are using airplanes, ships, and trains and vehicles and so on and so forth. That is. Then you explain. Because the first point was telling us that the mode of transport differs or is a concern. That's the point. Explanation, you explain, tell us that in ancient trade, they are using human portrayal and animals. But in modern trade, they are using airplanes, ships, blah, 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 blah. Someone's disturbing me here. They're using airplanes, ships, blah, blah, blah. Then apply and say, this speeds up modern trade compared to the slow movement of the Asian trade. In other words, you are comparing both. You said in the first point that they were using the mode of transport was the point. Then you explained that mode of transport. Then you apply. You are saying that in modern trade, the modes of transport speeds up the transactions compared to the slow movement of goods that was there during the other ancient trade. That's the application. We proceed. And they say, point number 2, the use of barter versus use of money. We say, and then explain. We tell us that In ancient trade, they were using barter trade or exchange of goods for goods. While in modern trade, they are using money. Say, hey, okay, that's nice. That's nice. Then you apply. Say, this makes modern trade more efficient and flexible because the money is available and so on and so forth. So modern trade becomes quite more flexible. You are applying. Then you can also add a third one and say the nature of goods traded in was also a comparison. Okay? Traditional goods used butter. I mean, traditional goods, they are trading goods like beads, cowrie shells, and ivory. While modern trade, it involves manufactured goods, electronics, and other services. Hey, okay. Then apply. Modern trade, I mean, then apply, then say, this therefore makes modern trade quite easy, flexible, and manageable compared to the ancient trade. Say, okay, that's wonderful. We can have the last one or one or two more and say, the technology in trade. Technology in trade is also a comparison. So, modern trade uses computers, mobile money, and other banking systems. Yet, in the ancient trade, there was nothing of such like technology. Apply now. This implies that in ancient trade, it was just manual, while in modern trade, it is actually technological and flexible. Okay. You keep comparing and comparing and comparing, giving us the differences. But of course, at some point, you can even give us some of the similarities. But even if you don't, so as long as you give us what you have given us, well explained, well applied, and then you conclude, no problem. So we are remaining with 5 minutes. Let me recap what I've been telling you. For those of you who came late, because there are those who came late, let me once again recap what I said. First of all, let me show my face. For those who came late, it's me, your teacher. I'm Teacher Abdallah from Gaza High School. And I'm the one who has been asked today to talk about history. When I was beginning, there are certain things that I put emphasis on. I said the question to be awarded very well. One, someone must identify the problem in the scenario. Two, one must introduce to get a score. One. Two, if the question has two parts, we introduce the first part, but we don't conclude it. We don't introduce the second part, but we conclude it. And then I said that the points to be awarded, you must give the point, you must explain, you must apply. That's like I said that someone must be in a position to, if you want to know that your points are having all the features, at least put in your head that before I leave a point, I must have put in 3 full stops. The first full stop comes at the end of the point statement. The second full stop comes at the end of the explanation. The third full stop comes at the end of the application. Once you realize that you are not having 3 full stops, it means that you have not given what you are supposed to give. Then, once you do all that, you'll be good to go. And finally, I said, for those of you who will want some work from me, you can send me a message on WhatsApp, and I give you some work, some questions, some guides, and so on. And the number you can use will be MTN 0775 45 2323. I said 0775 45 2323. You send a message, you send a hi, you introduce yourself. Of course, I receive many messages, so you can introduce yourself and say, I'm so and so, maybe you told us about the notes, blah, blah, blah. And I will give you some work. Or you can ask questions, or you can even write an introduction or a point to see if you are good to go. You send it, I can mark it in my free time, and I can guide you through an audio. I can guide you here and there, such that we get the best out of it. We don't have too much time with us. I can simply say, I may not go beyond this point. I'll simply say, thank you for attending the lesson. Next time when we have a lesson, try to be quite early because it's extremely time conscious. So try to be quite early, and may God bless you. For God and my country, let us meet again if God allows us. Thank you. Okay.